Um, so this is just a kind of a melange of thoughts that I've got and I've kind of recollected and kind of put together and stuff. So I apologise if it's a bit messy, but you know, it wouldn't be queer if it wasn't messy. So first of all, I want to just thank everyone. First of all, our panelists, our keynotes, the audience, and our kind of an amazing team. There's been like a fantastic amount of people who have kind of contributed to this in so many different ways and in so many different forms, whether they've been here or not. Names that have come up a lot, we've obviously had Halberstam and Love here. Other names that have come up, we've got Munoz, we've had Ahmed's come up a lot, we've had smatterings of Butler, as you would expect at a queer conference, of course. But what am I actually doing here? Well, what I want to do is I want to build on just a couple of the ideas that Hannah mentioned in the introduction and then go forward. And Hannah hasn't heard this, by the way. I literally wrote this like this afternoon, so what are you going to say, Nick? And I kind of want to build on some of the ideas and themes that have arisen throughout the conference and kind of hopefully tie it all together. I think Kat at the end did an amazing job of tying together this idea of queer joy, and I'm just kind of pulling together all of the other things to add to that. So first of all, I want to talk about the idea that, first of all, have I got them open? I do. First of all, I want to talk about the idea that Queer Disrupt was built quite desperately from a space of collapse. And by that, I mean, Queer Disrupt is absolutely a product of the pandemic in that way. And when I say collapse, I use it in the way that I'm deliberately using the words that Halberstam used in his keynote there. And I use this as both kind of positive and negative. And the negative I want to talk about is this kind of, when Queer Disrupt was being formed in the way that it kind of is manifested as it is now, it came from a collapse of funding. It came from a collapse of infrastructure. It came from a collapse of academic space that me and Hannah in particular were very familiar with, and other members of our team. I know Phoenix, although less academic, more academically junior, I should say, in terms of they're an undergrad, for example. But this was a space that we were very comfortable with, and all of this went, as well as all of the social spheres that we were comfortable with as well. And what this meant was, when Queer Disrupt was being formed, we were planning it and it was being formulated in a very unusual way. I'm actually going to just share my screen and just show, oh, can you enable screen sharing? Sorry. Can't get the team. Thank you. So one of the things that we're talking about is I'm going to share this screen here. And you can see this is actually the original website description that I put together. And I was on the floor of my brother's living room in Milton Keynes with an elderly, disabled, 6-foot, agoraphobic Irish wolfhound running around me, terrified of the Hoover. As we were putting this together, and you can see we're like, oh, let's do it rainbow, it's going to be fabulous and amazing and stuff. And you know, my dog was blissfully unaware of what's happening and like laying on me. She weighs like God knows how many stone. But I share this because this kind of shows where we started. It was literally labeled the concept website. I'm going to share another image as well, which I don't think we've ever shared publicly before. And it's going to be, yeah, hopefully, yes. These are all the first logo designs that we had. And you can see we had all of these different ones that we were looking at here. And if you look down at the bottom, you can see the one that we've got there that we built on and developed. So this is the first address. And I'm using this, these examples here to point out, aside from just the collapse of all of the infrastructure and funding and the space and everything that I mentioned. 1 second, because my computer is playing silly buggers. No, it's wanting to save the previous talk. There we are. It has also led to the collapse of other things. And by that, I mean, it's led to the collapse of the limitations that we otherwise would have faced in this moment. Me and Hannah have spent, I do not know how many hours of work on Queer Disrupt, and in particular this conference, and we've been propped up by a truly brilliant team. There is absolutely no way me and Hannah could have done this by ourselves, and I don't think we could have done it in isolation. And people like Phoenix, we've got James Whitfield on the team, we've got Adebayo, Sayantan, who's a new member of the team, Melissa, who unfortunately wasn't able to be here at the actual conference, but everyone else. Look at the website, there's like 15 of us. Like, so if I haven't mentioned you, it's just because of time. Like, it couldn't be done this way. And this conference is that culmination of over a year's worth of work. Although we officially launched in, I think it was August, am I right? August, yeah. The work that had been going into this had been going on since February. So to give you an idea of the scope, and it was always envisaged in our mind there would be a conference. So with this collapse of limitations, it's enabled a huge amount of connections. And I want to use that kind of link just to kind of point into some of my reflections of the conference overall. And there appears to be, at least from where I'm sat, 3 main themes that have run throughout the conference, and they build on each other. And the first one is connections. We have had all the way through these connections as an undercurrent, and that connections here isn't just the kind of queer connections that we build in through our bodies and people and concepts. I mean, just look at the queer sex panel, those of you who made it to hear all about connections, but also those desires for connections, which I think are really important. And I'm thinking particularly personally of Alexandra Brown's unbelievably moving autoethnographic letter, pointing at this desire for connection to kind of an unnamed, or Emmanuel was the pseudonym, but an unnamed schoolboy that she had taught. But also this links to the second theme that has run throughout the whole thing, which is this of possibility. And it's this possibility of what queer is and does, and what queer has been and means. And throughout this conference, the limitations of queerness and what we mean and understand by queer has been challenged, both in kind of intellectual constructs. And I think, again, there's many examples. An illustrative example to be Matt Kennedy's paper on queer and trans as kind of evil siblings of each other, but also to the kind of the latent possibilities of sitting in unknown possibilities. And I'm thinking here of Liam Lewis's paper on queer untranslatability, and kind of sitting in that kind of unimbued language and gibberish that you sit there and have. But there's also the possibility of the future. Where is this going, right? Which is interesting because I'm very future orientated. Hannah's a historian by training. Heather Love was talking about how it turns a bit too much towards the future for them. And I'm like, no! But I want to kind of think like, what are these connections? What connections have been rendered possible? So go back to this idea by this. And we kind of ended on that queer spaces panel, which I think kind of looks at carving the possibility of connections. As an example, it hasn't escaped my notice that we opened, the very first paper that opened the entire conference was one of kind of quite horrific, very fascinating paper, quite horrific paper on queer people in Soviet Union prisons, right? And we've ended on this kind of, how do we make space for queer joy? And I think it kind of shows, at least to me, that the conference itself has, at least in my mind, collapsed some of the boundaries that we have faced and we think about, and kind of opened up to this possibility of joy. The final thread I want to talk about is reciprocity, and the idea of reciprocalness, as it were, between us. And that's in the work that has been brought to this conference, the work that has gone into the conference, and the work of all of us together as a community. And there's kind of the possibilities, the connections, and the multiplicities of these kind of reciprocal acts that we're all engaged in. The language throughout the entire conference has, at least from, again, where I'm sat from, nearly always swung towards reciprocal and community. It's always been we, it's been us. It's been very community focused. There's been very few examples where someone's gone, I think, and that is it, or I want to do this. It's always been when I, or the singular, has been used in the kind of in the aim of a broader understanding or a broader connection, all coming together. And I think that's a real kind of brilliant testament to the people who have attended and the kind of, I guess, I don't want to universalize here, but bear with me, the kind of queer community that have come here and we've engaged with and that we've all contributed and created. So my provocation from this, because I'm a provocative little shit, frankly, my provocation moving forward is I want us to kind of sit with this discomfort that is often created from some of these sometimes quite difficult conversations and moving forward, and reflect on these connections, these possibilities, and on this reciprocity that takes place. I don't think, for example, that this conference has changed the shape of academia, much as I would love to believe I had that much power. I would love to think that we'd sit there and change the fate. Of course we haven't. And I think if we made that claim, I think we would rightly be laughed at. But what I do hope we've done is being able to kind of rest in that discomfort that queer often feels with the academic space. And hopefully, and one of the aims that Queer Disrupt has done, is hopefully being able to chip away at those boundaries and hopefully collapse those boundaries into a much more open and accessible space. They're my reflections. What I want to do, and I want to give the opportunity to, and by no means has anyone had to take me up on that offer, is I want to invite just a few questions, if anyone has, for us in the Q&A box, directly to me and Hannah, preferably particularly related to the conference, or any thoughts or anything that anyone wants to feedback, as people can all see those questions. I think they can. And give you the opportunity to feed back to us, as it were. And again, please don't feel obliged. And then after that, I'm just going to have 2 or 3 minutes wrapping up at the end, a few kind of logistical stuff, but I think important stuff. Please stay. I tell you how to donate. Please stay. Yeah, so I'll give maybe a minute or two for people to kind of think. And if no one feedback, completely fine, and we'll wrap up a few minutes early. But any thoughts? But what's next for Queer Disrupt? That's all right. Yeah, boy, Ben. I do cover that. But you know what? Since you asked, I'll address that now, and it will give people some time to think if there are any other questions. What are we doing? And I'll respond to that question as well in the chat. So we are, in short, having a break. To say, I think I've pointed out the work that has gone into this, and that's not to complain, but it is to say a break is overdue. We've been working on this since February, and we haven't actually had any semblance of a break. We're also very aware that our profile as a group has grown exponentially since the start of the academic year, so since September and October, in a kind of terrifyingly high way that we didn't expect, frankly. So we are having a break, but alongside that break, we're doing a retrospective, which means over the next 2 months, there won't be any explicitly new content from us. What there will be, though, is feeding back to all of the previous stuff that we have presented and all of the previous stuff that we've recorded. And it'll give everyone the opportunity who has joined recently to catch up, basically, and see a lot of the really fantastic work that a lot of people have missed because of our profile just not being as high, and we want to open that up to everyone. Other things that are coming in, although in August we're not doing anything online, anyone local to the area, we have been invited to do some things for Coventry Pride. Coventry being Coventry UK, obviously. Some of the things that we are doing there, for example, involve some drag stuff from me. We're going to be doing some educational stuff. We want to do a podcast from there, a general Queer Disrupt educational talk and panels and all sorts. It's going to be really, really exciting. We are also, I mean, I say we're having a break. It doesn't sound like we're having a break because it's all taking place in August. We are recording and we are pushing out a podcast. We're changing the way we're doing our podcast. We still have a few more podcasts coming out, but we're doing seasons for podcasts. And the first one, if I can, get my finger out and actually put my act together, is going to be on BDSM and consent. And I think builds really nicely on some of the queer sex panel conversations that came about earlier. And I think the one after that is going to be
looking at queer gaming, but not the storytelling aspects that we started with. So one of the first podcasts we ever did, if everybody can hear me, everybody they can. One of the first podcasts that we did was on the history of queer gaming, but I want to think about, can you actually queer gaming, like with the I don't know, with the technology and all this kind of stuff. So that's my next thing, which sounds nothing like what I'm doing, and it's not. But I just really want to know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I look at drag queens, I don't look at BDSM and sex. So but we've kind of been doing that. We've got another question in regards of how do we choose the speakers for the conference? Well, in short, we just put out a call. And then we got many more than we anticipated responding. So how did we choose? Difficulty. The long and the short of it is we shortlisted and we had a very long conversation in the meeting. And within that, we kind of mixed together different panels. One of the things we were exceptionally keen to avoid was the very traditional structures that we often see at panels. And broad brushstrokes, bear with me here. What we often see at a lot of conferences is, for example, queer bodies. And that basically means anyone who works in kind of disability theory or trans theory. There we see a lot of like non-Western narratives, and basically it feels like this awful tokenistic excuse to put all the people of color on a panel, and it was just gross and not anyway what we were looking to do at all. What we wanted to do, and I hope we achieved, was to have this kind of quite melange of different kind of themes and webs and connections that all kind of link together. And hopefully you noticed connections across the panels, and a lot of the panels could have been restructured with the same speakers and still being perfectly valid panels, I believe. So I think hopefully that's what we achieved there. Have you got anything to add to that?
Just we had a lot of the committee members on the panel to decide though, so it wasn't just me and Nick.
Yeah, there was
like,
eight of us. 8 of us were fed in. The one thing, just in complete transparency, because I know one of the speakers at the conference is a member of Queer Disrupt. The person who spoke is a volunteer, and they were not involved in any of the decision-making process. It was an extraordinarily competitive one, and you can find the abstract that was submitted if you do want to look for that on the panel pack. Just putting that out there clearly and out there, and we think they did an amazing job, and we're extraordinarily proud of them. Are there any other questions? Because if not, I'll just do the last couple of minutes and kind of wrap up. Okay, well, no, I am going to start wrapping up. We're all very tired, frankly, and you can drop us an email at hello@queerdisrupt.com, and that goes primarily to the team and me and Hannah and Phoenix and a few others, and we'll be able to respond to that. Oh, I can see a question. When's the next Queer Disrupt conference? Oh, good Lord. Okay, probably, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, not next year. Yeah. If we do it again, it's going to be in 2 years. It'll be a biennial conference. The reason being because we have had so much there that So Scott, I'll respond to that in a second as well. They've got another question that I'll respond to. The reason for that is we are very busy next year. We are talking about all the events we've got next year. We are hoping to average about one a month, an event a month. We've already got about 3 or 4 months worth of stuff. One of the reasons being is because so many of the papers that were submitted, we were like, oh my God, these are incredible. But we just simply weren't enough to create a panel theme. But we felt this was work that we definitely wanted to kind of highlight and go from that. We are hoping to do, and this is very early news, don't hold us to it, please, don't. We're hoping, me and Hannah, to spearhead designing a module on, for teaching at a university. Yes, we're aware there are various institutional problems and things that's all of that, please don't tear into us. But what we're hoping to do is do a queer disruptions module and basically look at how we can kind of fuck with academia, basically, from the inside. Someone made a comment about the webinar and about it was just a little bit disappointed they couldn't see everyone. The reasons we did the webinar was simply so we could have as many people as possible. The limitations on the Zoom room, which would have been amazing, and the ability to control that space was just, it was impractical to a point of undoable, unfortunately. Would I have loved us to have all been there and all been able to see each other? And one of my favorite things to do at events, which we normally do in a Zoom room, is have everyone turn on their cameras at the beginning and say hello to the speaker and wave. And then it's just like, oh my God, and then people can turn it off again. And it's a beautiful kind of amazing community thing that we unfortunately just haven't been able to do at this conference.
We're only using the webinar for the conference, so we will be going back to the usual Zoom space so everybody can say hello. The other issue was just the technical aspect of having other people's video on really slows down and makes it chug and could have caused issues with the speakers. So that was the other logistical thing. Because of
that. We've had how many participants joined in? First question. So we sold, quotation, sold 950 tickets. We had a 1,000-person seminar, webinar sort of structure, and 50 were filled, the speakers, any specific guests like the keynotes, the team itself, and the odd couple of other people who were relevant and invited. In terms of actual events, numbers fluctuated, but I think the lowest we had at any point was about 70 something at the lowest point. But I think nearly all of them got over 100. The keynotes themselves were, as you would expect, over 200. Yeah. I
was going to say the other thing that I don't think we realized or really planned for. We knew we'd started growing a global audience, but people couldn't attend all the things. You know, we had people on social media saying, I got up at like 4:30 in the morning just to come and listen to the first panels. So I feel like that's why some of the numbers
staggered. To use an example, Cyan Tan was hosting a panel earlier, and it was 6:30 in India where they were at the time. So there's no way they've been able to see this, which is why we recorded them. I'm going to wrap up. A couple of things I just want to mention. The talks that have been recorded, which I think is all of them, with the exception of the queer sex panel, where I think it's just 1 or 2 on there. All of them, with the exception of 1, should be going up soon, including the keynotes, and that will be in September, hopefully. When we've got that, after we've got all of this kind of apparent resting that we're doing. So what it means is that we might look like we're not doing much in August, but we are extraordinarily busy behind the scenes, and there are a lot of plans there that I won't bore you with because it's just kind of infrastructural things. We will be sending out a survey to all of the people who signed up. Please fill it in. We do want to learn. So if you do have constructive feedback, we are open to that, and we are aware things haven't always gone exactly the way that we wanted it. Some of you may have noticed, some of you may not have. We are always willing and prepared to learn. Please talk about us on social media positively. So, whatever, if it was positive, it was Queer Disrupt. If it was awful, it was the LGB Alliance. And rip into them. And finally, it's always a kind of awkward bit here. We are all volunteers. Everything we do is for free. If you are able to donate, please do. If you go onto the website, there's a PayPal button. That's literally to a specific Queer Disrupt account. Me and Hannah are pretty transparent with what we do with it. None of us are paid. We are not paid for any of this, and all of the money, I mean like every penny, goes back into us being able to do events for free for you. There's a lot of money that has been spent on this conference. To be frank, that's not a criticism, it's just a fact. And the fortunate situation that we were in with funding, we were able to do that. We don't have that for next year, and we're desperately applying for funding now. So anything you can give genuinely helps, and it frees me and Hannah up from fighting on funding bids to carry on putting these events. I'll leave it there because I do want to leave on this fantastic kind of queer joy note and kind of moving forward into the future. So I'm going to end it on that and go a final thank you to everyone who's been here, everyone who's contributed, and just, I guess, a goodbye from the Queer Disrupt team, myself and Hannah.
Bye. Thank you.